Welcome to Kit Catastrophe. My name is Jeeves, as I am filling in for Master Kit. Today we shall be taking a comprehensive look at the Transformers Studio Series Deluxe Class COGMAN action figure. This figure first began to be sold in the year of our Lord 2019 as part of the 6th wave of the Deluxe Class assortment, and represents COGMAN's appearance in the 2017 motion picture Transformers The Last Knight. Before I go into detail on the action figure proper, I shall first bring your attention to the form which COGMAN had taken within the film itself. COGMAN is rendered as a Titan Master, something which Master Kit is perchance to describe as the Transformers equivalent of a Lego minifigure, and so he has instructed me to use them as a benchmark for size comparisons. COGMAN's Titan Master body is splendidly detailed, with moulding to rival that of Caravaggio. However, he seems to be completely unpainted from the front, something which I do believe Caravaggio would find disappointing. I've been instructed to go into COGMAN's backside at a later time. For those of you deep in consternation as to why this gentleman is reduced to a Titan Master, that is because COGMAN was hinted at being something called a Headmaster in The Last Knight, and was presumably supposed to barbarically behead a scoundrel by the name of Nitro Zeus, and take possession of his corpse. How macabre. Nevertheless, COGMAN's Titan Master form does not stray from the norm of his contemporaries, featuring only very basic articulation. Now it is time to take a gander at COGMAN's Transtector. The inert large robotic body transforms into a rather stylish and striking Aston Martin DB11, adorned with an immaculate silver sheen that rivals that of Studio Series Autobot Jazz, and is an immense step above the drab and uninspired bare grey plastic of this mold's original release. Much like the real automobile on which this figure is based, the vehicle mode is sleek and refined, and many of the proper details are picked out in appropriate inkwork, although the Aston Martin badges are not detailed. My favourite piece of detailing in this mode is the black used to pick out the side mirrors and line the windscreen, though some more black or even gunmetal could have been utilised to pick out the venting detail on the bonnet. Unlike the real vehicle, COGMAN's canopy opens up to reveal the insides, instead of having openable doors. This is a first among Titan Master compatible vehicles in that 2 Titan Masters can fit within, and the driver is even seated on the proper side. As for weapons storage, the included sword can stow away underneath the rear of the vehicle. Transformation is startlingly simple compared to most of Master Kit's Bayformers collection, though it manages to still be a little more complex than most Titans Return Deluxes. A fair deal of the conversion scheme is devoted to getting the mass of the car folded up tidily, which it succeeds in doing rather well. One of my favourite touches is the rotation of the bonnet to sit flusher within the backpack. Despite the shell-former nature of the alternate mode, every piece has a very solid ending point. I am somewhat impressed. Now, something I am even more impressed with would have to be the robot mode. There's just something about this that gives me a vague knightly impression. Of course, it's most likely due to his ribbed for her pleasure plate armor all across his body. While COGMAN is somewhat rife with vehicle mode kibble, I do believe he wears it well, and none of it is particularly egregious. I do particularly admire the pale gold paintwork adorning his chest plate and midriff, which is far more visually appealing than the original release's gunky blackwash. The head sculpt, likewise, is very admirable. It looks astoundingly screen accurate and is very nicely detailed in its paintwork. I should note here that, as alluded to earlier, COGMAN's Titan Master can be used to replace the Last Knight Voyager-class Nitro Zeus's head, as in the unused film scene, or to replace any other Titans Return figure's head. COGMAN's only real accessory is a sword based on the blade wielded by Cade Yeager in the final act of Transformers The Last Knight. Its blade is painted the same lustrous silver as the rest of COGMAN, and looks good in his hands, though you have to unfurl the vehicle mode door out in order for it to seat properly. COGMAN does come with a stage, just like every other Studio Series figure. This one is titled London Escape, which represents a chase scene from The Last Knight, and is so far a completely unique backdrop. Now, I have been instructed to relay a pre-recorded video from Master Kit, in which he demonstrates the figure's articulation. So, when discussing COGMAN's articulation, the first thing I want to bring up is that, yes, his head is Titan Master, so he has regular Titan Master articulation. This is technically a ball-jointed head, but it's only really useful in the left-right axis. He can tilt a little, but that's more to the nature of the socket, and of course, as you can see, it springs back. And he can't really nod or anything, or do anything other than a regular swivel. But the connection is fairly solid, though putting him on Nitro Zeus, he's a little loose. He's a little loosey-goosey in Nitro Zeus's caboosey. And his shoulders are on a ball joint that has an impressive range of motion, because the cup that it's on is so big. It can go all the way out, and the ball joint is connected to on a little rod that has a hinge, so he can like shrug and be like, "Oh, come at me, bro." I'm bad at posing on the fly. His shoulder pauldrons can move outwards for ease of motion, or to just, make him look cool. His bicep swivels is just a simple mushroom peg slotted in there, and the elbow is adequate. It's just a simple hinge, and if you unfurl the door here, you can move his wrist. Well, that doesn't look like a useful articulation joint. When you bring in the sword, it allows for him to point it at things, and it makes swordsman poses all the more dynamic and photogenic. He has nothing at the waist, nothing in the body. It's all one big piece, or I guess 2 pieces. And given that there's a hinge right here on his ass, I don't think there could be one. His thighs are ball jointed, much like the shoulders, and they have a good range. There's no thigh swivel, though there is a swivel right above the knee, which I guess you could count as a thigh swivel. Though it's a little too low for my taste, but, it gets the job done. And, finally, there is a knee hinge, though for some reason there's just one big detent. Like, it clicks into place when you're putting it back to straight, and I think this hurts articulation more than it helps, because there's a lot of times when I'm messing with this guy where I'm just like, let me just, I think this stance would be a lot better if he could just subtly bend his knee, but as you can see, that's not exactly possible. This is as subtle as you can get, and that's a little too exaggerated for some of the things that I think of. And finally, his feet, they're not exactly articulated, but you can push them forward, so I guess it could help in like a walking pose, but I'm not a big fan of those. So all in all, COGMAN is a very decently posable figure, and of course when you bring in the sword, that opens up a lot more possibilities, which I really like. And one little aspect that I like about this is that you can almost kinda sorta get him to two-hand the sword, and that looks really cool.
Studio Series COGMAN, while being a straight repurpose of a previous Toy Lines figure, sits very well within the existing Studio Series lineup, adding a very fun play feature to a line so far devoid of gimmickry outside of the Constructicons. In addition, he is far easier to obtain stateside than his previous release was, making him even more enticing. I wholeheartedly recommend him. This has been Jeeves, filling in for Kit Katastrophe, bidding you farewell until next time. Until then, it's time to transform and roll out.